Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Terry Tallis, and I'm chair of Stockport NHS Watch. I'd like to welcome all of you, our candidates, to this Hustings event, organised by us, Stockport NHS Watch, in conjunction with Stockport 38 Degrees. I'm very pleased to welcome all candidates for Cheadle constituency on the platform, and I believe the two independent candidates are in the audience, Matthew Torbett, and we hope, if he's not here already, he will be coming soon, Drew Carswell. They will have an opportunity to make their views known a bit later on. Thank you all for coming, and we appreciate you being here, and look forward very much to hearing what you all have to say. We appreciate especially the fact you've turned out on a Saturday night. Thank you. I'm also very glad to welcome so many of you in the audience. When we organised this, thought of organising it, we did of course have the dread thought that nobody at all might turn up. Thank you for making that not correct. Thank you also for turning out on a Saturday night. Okay, well, with that I'm going to hand you over to my husband, Professor Raymond Tallis, who's going to chair the rest of the evening.
Well, good evening, everyone, and I want to add my thanks to Terry for you to come out tonight on a wet and windy night, and also to the candidates. So we feel very fortunate that we've got a full set here, and thank you very much indeed for turning out. And I'd like to reiterate what Terry said. We're delighted to be working with Stockport 38 Degrees and also Stock TTIP Manchester. So I myself was a doctor for 37 years, and I'm a member of Stockport NHS Watch. Those are my credentials. I'd like to just emphasise how much I do appreciate the fact that all the candidates have prioritised tonight. I know they could be attending half a dozen other events, and they've obviously identified this as the most important one, and they're absolutely correct, of course. So thank you very much indeed for doing so. Now, our panellists are Mark Hunter for the Lib Dems, who's our current MP, as many of you know, Martin Miller from Labour, Mary Robertson for Conservatives, John Pearson, Left Unity, Sean Hopkins, UKIP, and Gary Lawson, Green. And a special thanks to Gary because he stepped in at very short notice. We were due, as you will see from the programme, to have Graham Reid, but unfortunately Graham is ill. In addition, in the audience we have at least one independent candidate, whom I identified, Matthew Torbin, and also I think Drew Carswell is expecting to turn up shortly. He's coming up from London. Apologies to you, Drew, and to Matt for not including you on the panel, but I think even I couldn't manage a panel of 8, I'm sure, fairly vocal people. But I will make sure that you have the opportunity to ask a question in the second half, which is Q&A. And this brings me to the format of the evening that's set out in the flyer on your seats. You've all got flyers, I think, but I'll go through it nonetheless. We have quite an agenda to get through. We have a large and distinguished panel, and we have an audience, equally distinguished, I'm sure, but all of whom will be dying to quiz the candidates. So time will be of the essence. And I want to ask the panellists to be succinct in their answers, and not to interrupt each other if possible, even if they think they're talking nonsense. Courtesy, I'm sure, will prevail. I'll be very happy if there are rounds of applause, and I think we can tolerate sharp intakes of breath, but there should be no booing. So I hope that's okay. So in the first part, we're going to be discussing 3 topics. Energy policy, and the discussion will be led by Mark Porter. TTIP, and Bridget Lechner is going to pose the question to the panel about TTIP, and then the third topic will be the NHS. Basically, we will expect or hope that each of our candidates, each of our panellists will be able to respond succinctly to the questions that we pose. There's going to be 20 minutes for energy policy, 20 minutes for TTIP, and 30 minutes for the NHS. And then this will take just over an hour, and then we shall have, throw the whole thing open to the people, and we'll have 40 minutes of questions and answers. Now, because we've got a lot to go through, and I'm sure a lot of people will have a lot of strongly held views, I'm going to be an absolutely ruthless chairman. The guillotine will drop mid-sentence if the deadline has been reached, in order to be fair to everyone, to make sure everybody has a say. And that's particularly true of making sure that all the candidates have a say. I'll reinforce that when we come to Q&A, and you'll notice that my own opening comments, which are billed for 5 minutes, will only be 4 minutes to show that I'm going to practice what I preach. So our first lead is sitting in the front here, and it's Martin Porter. Martin is an environmental campaigner for frack-free Greater Manchester and one of the organisers of the Manchester People's Climate March. So Martin, it's over to you to set the ball rolling on energy policy. Thank you.
Good evening. Very pleased to be here to speak to the candidates about energy policy, because this is a subject which you cannot discuss without mentioning climate change. Possibly the issue that is most important for the future of human civilization, yet the one in which political leadership is so obviously most lacking. The integrity of the science that warns of the danger is constantly being reinforced, whilst those who deny the problem are regularly shown to have no integrity. We have been aware of this problem for more than a quarter of a century, yet all our efforts to deal with it have come to nothing. Market-based solutions have conspicuously failed. Indeed, Sir Nicholas Stern has called climate change the greatest and widest-ranging market failure ever seen. The politicians have done a little better than the business leaders. In 2008, the previous government passed the Climate Change Act, committing us to an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Unfortunately, this year, the current government passed the infrastructure bill, which includes the legal requirement to maximise economic recovery of UK petroleum. Meanwhile, the fossil fuel industry continues to benefit from billions of pounds of state subsidy, much of it hidden. British companies mine the tar sands of Canada, explore for new oil in the pristine wilderness of the Arctic, and search for shale gas in the rocks beneath our feet. Internationally, the politics is stalled. Negotiations to reach a global deal come of age this year with COP21 in Paris, yet we are no nearer a solution. Few people would argue with George Monbiot's description of the process as hundreds of intelligent, educated, well-paid and elegantly dressed people wasting their lives. And it's not as if we don't know what needs to be done. Renewable energy, better public transport and more insulation in our homes is pretty much all that there is to it. What's more was cleaner air, less traffic and warmer houses are all desirable things in their own right. The campaign against climate change has shown that making this happen will create 1 million new jobs, meaning the solution to our climate crisis could also be the solution to our social crisis. It will take a fair bit of investment, but not as much as it took to bail out the financial system after the credit crunch. If the banks were too big to fail, then the climate definitely is. So what's to be done? The Guardian newspaper, our only newspaper not owned by a billionaire, is putting its weight behind the fossil fuel divestment campaign and efforts to keep the carbon in the ground, the case for which, says editor Alan Rusbridger, is becoming an overwhelming one. So my question to the candidates is in 3 parts. Do they accept the science of climate change? Do they agree that all we have tried so far has failed and will most likely continue to fail if we carry on in the same way? And will they support the campaign to keep fossil fuels in the ground by saying no to the imports of Canadian tar sands oil, by stopping British companies drilling in the Arctic, and by ending the rush to frack for shale gas? And to reply, we'll start, please, with Mark Hunter for the Liberal Democrats. 3 minutes, please.
Okay. Thanks very much indeed. Can you all hear me? I'm afraid I've got a bit of a sore throat this evening, but I'll try and project as... oh, right, thank you. Yeah.
You need to hold it close.
Right, how's that? Is that any better? Is it working? Sorry?
Probably better without the mic.
I was better without the mic. Is that the general view? I might have been better not being here at all, frankly, but that's for you to judge. Right, look, I've probably wasted most of a minute now. So, the first thing, do I accept the science? Absolutely. Absolutely, I do agree. Climate change is arguably the biggest issue facing mankind, humankind. I would put that in perspective by saying my first party political conference I attended 30 years ago, the Liberal Party as it was then were discussing wind and solar power. And in those days it was all, beards and sandals, the caricature. Nobody took those issues seriously, or very few of us did. But as time has gone on, I'm even more convinced than I ever was, climate change is a real and pressing problem. We do have to have tough measures to tackle it, and I am proud that in this last government, the climate change minister has been a Liberal Democrat, Ed Davey. And I would take issue with some of the things in my answer that have been mentioned so far. I don't think there's a general implication all the measures have failed. Well, you know, as a glass half full person, I have to be, I'm a Liberal Democrat, as a glass half full person, let's just remind ourselves that the amount of energy now going into the national grid from renewables has increased by 2/3 during the lifetime of this government. So we are running to catch up, make no mistake about that. And there are still a lot of non-believers about the need to tackle climate change and invest in renewables, not just in Parliament, but on the doorsteps as well. I meet them every time I go out canvassing. So let's not assume that because we all agree this issue is important, everybody else does. They don't. As regards fracking, just coming briefly on to your third and final point, I recently voted for a moratorium on fracking. I think the science is still unproven on this. I don't believe the dangers of the kind of experiments we're talking about in this country with the caveats and licenses are necessarily relevant to the American experience where the technology was all so much older, and I think we have moved on. But because of the concerns that have been expressed to me probably by people in this room and elsewhere, I do share the concerns, and that's why I recently voted in Parliament for a moratorium on fracking. Is that my 3 minutes?
Martin Miller for Labour, please.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, the issue is really not whether I accept the science or not. The issue is the fact that the Royal Society accepts the science, the National Academy of Science of the United States, of Russia, of Brazil, of China, of France, Australia, the Royal Society of Canada, of India. Frankly, it's not down to me whether the science is accurate or not. I think I'm prepared to rely on their viewpoint rather than the odd person who has got no scientific qualifications whatsoever and thinks it's some kind of middle-class obsession. So, on the basis that every respectable scientist accepts it, then yes, absolutely. Not only is it happening, but it's undoubtedly happening because of the actions of human beings. And the sad thing is that no matter what we do at this point in time, probably because of the amount of, in the main carbon dioxide, but obviously things like methane as well, we have pumped into the atmosphere, we have probably locked in to our future climate already a rise in temperatures, and we have to think about how we're going to deal with that. There's no way of clearing that out of the atmosphere. So absolutely the science is accurate. Do I think we failed? Like Mark, I would say I don't think we have absolutely failed in things, but we haven't done anywhere near enough. Even the system, for example, of carbon credits that was introduced as a way of reducing carbon in the economy, actually we've seen abuse of that, where the carbon's been traded, the credits have been traded to allow some economies to actually increase their carbon output. So there are clearly massive problems that have to be dealt with. And yes, we need a massive diversification programme and a massive shift towards renewable technologies. Actually, we need that for the environment. We need it actually because of the new economic opportunities it gives us for growth as much as anything else. How we get from where we are today to that point is not a thing you can ignore. We can't simply switch off the contribution of fossil fuels today. We have to think about how we phase towards that. So I'm not absolutely opposed to fracking, actually. I do think that until we have absolutely got regulation in place on a number of things, like fugitive emissions into groundwater or fugitive gas emissions from it, then actually we shouldn't allow any licences to be granted. But when we get those in place, then yes, I think that's a contribution that can be made.
Thank you, and I think this may be one of those rare occasions when politicians may have quite a lot that they agree on. So the first thing that we talked about was, that you asked about, was climate change and what our views are on it, and do we believe in it? Well, yes, and I don't know if anyone else would say no, but certainly yes, the evidence is there. And I tend to believe in an evidence-based approach to things generally. I think that's quite a good place to start with whether it is about climate change or anything else. We need to follow the evidence. So agreement, I would say, that there is would be quite firm. I was sorry to hear you say that efforts have come to nothing in terms of tackling climate change, because I would hope that that's not the case. I would hope that there has been a real view amongst politicians and amongst members of the public as well. And I think probably it's members of the public that are hardest to get over to some viewpoints. But they really have taken on, I would say, in very good measure, the fact that climate change exists and something needs to be done about it. When we're talking about energy use and how we can deal with these things, fracking is in the mix. Renewables are in the mix. A lot of work is being done at the University of Manchester on renewables. We should really look at this. The whole energy and the climate change debate should be looked at in terms of mixed energy and mixed usage and how it can best work for us. And so I'm not sure that the argument has been lost on this, and certainly with things like the Green Deal, with encouraging people to use less energy, these are all ways that government and I believe that organisations have put pressure on the members of Parliament and also on the public to think more about climate change and think about how to tackle it. And like Mike, I would say that I agree with a lot of things that he said in terms of fracking too. It's in the mix. We have to have a look at it in a sensible way, and we have to make sure that all the concerns that people have about it are addressed and dealt with. And certainly I think that would be something that we would want to do. Thank you.
John Pearson for Left Unity.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Do I accept the science of climate change? Yes, I say that, but I don't accept it just because scientists say so, and I don't think anybody should. You should examine the evidence for yourself. I mean, one thing that I think we need to bear in mind is that scientists are sometimes sway with the mood of the times. I remember reading that government chief medical officers of health spent 150 years denying that pneumoconiosis was an occupational disease of mine workers. So, you know, the science doesn't always just stand on itself. I used to be sceptical about it, but I think what swayed me as my views is, first of all, the empirical evidence. There's no doubt whatsoever that the polar ice caps are melted. That's quite clear. We can see it on our television screens. Extreme weather events, tsunamis and massive flooding and things like that are definitely on the increase. And also, in looking at the theory of it, what I failed to understand, and I was a sceptic, and I was till quite recently, I used to think that carbon dioxide, how can it be a pollutant? Because it's a breath of fresh air to a whole half of life, the vegetable kingdom. What I hadn't grasped was that it's the digging up of fossil fuels. So on the current account, you've got your current account balance, but when you dig up fossil fuels, it's like a financial analogy. Everybody's spending everything that's in the deposit account. And you're pouring all that into the balance, into the mix, and obviously you knock things off kilter. So yeah, it's undoubted. Have efforts failed? Yeah, they have failed. I think that's clear. And if you read any book this year, I'd recommend you read an excellent new book by Naomi Klein called This Changes Everything, because she explains why it's failed. It's locked into the whole WTO trade structure, the whole neoliberalist experiment that we've had for 30 years now. These companies aren't going to put themselves out of business. The petroleum companies are the most profitable corporations there have ever been in history. They're not going to put themselves out of business. They are there to make profit. So, the attempts have failed, and they will fail until the people take the matters into their own hands. Do I support leaving fossil fuel in the ground, banning imports of tar sands and shale oil and banning fracking? Absolutely. Left Unity is for a ban on fracking in Britain, unequivocal ban, as we've seen already happen in France. The stuff consumes massive amounts of water, for goodness sake. What on earth's going to happen next time we have a drought? The fracking company's going to say, oh, well, give up our water, you've got to drink it. No more fracking till the drought's over. No way are they going to say that. And no way are privatised water companies going to say that they're not favouring the frackers. So, yeah, we are for a ban, and we're certainly for a ban on imports of a horrific thing like tar sands, which is absolutely ripping up vast vast acreages of Canada despoiling.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Next, Sean Hopkins of UKIP.
Could you just hang on a clock so I can see the time?
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Do I believe in climate change? Yeah, there's extreme weather events that are happening. They're around the world. I had this discussion last night with a gentleman, actually. He came over to me and he was quite forceful about his views on climate change, and he said that the world is full of deniers and basically we're all going to die. I had a discussion with him, actually, and I'm sure, like I said here, empirical evidence is one thing, but what I have noticed, what we do have, is all the people who are for climate change in a big way are paid by lobbies to say that's for climate change. The deniers are saying, well, no, it's not happening, but they're paid by people to tell them to deny it. Personally, my personal view, you should get all of them together, the pro and the deniers, and the impartials in the middle, and actually have joint panels and see what we really do. We know we can see what's going on. We can see what's going on. Now, renewables at the moment, as Mark said, I follow the renewables. I see the graphs that come out every day. The biggest problem we have with renewables, you cannot store the energy. You cannot store it. That is one of the biggest things we need to get over. It can only be used now, the moment it's actually being generated. And that to me is a travesty. We've got a fantastic scientific community in this country. We're world leaders on everything, and really we should be developing some way of storing that energy to actually help. Because until that happens, renewables are only useful for the moment that the power is being generated. But for us, one of the big problems I have is this Carbon Trading Act that's going on. It's a con. It is a big con. You can't buy and sell, in my opinion, carbons between one company and another and one country and another. If we're going to do it, we need to be serious about it and do it properly worldwide. You can't just say, in this country, we're losing a lot of our heavy industry to Turkey, to China, to India. We're now saying, well, we're good, we've decarbonised our industries. We haven't, we just moved it to another country. Now, in any sensible person on the planet, that's pretty short-sighted in my opinion, and a bit crazy. If we're going to do it, we need to do it properly. Yeah, keep it in the ground. No, at the moment, no, I don't believe so. However, we in UKIP do believe in fracking. It's in the mix, as the others have said. But we believe in the referendum for local people. So if there's going to be some around Manchester, then we believe that everybody else can go out, have the referendum. It's your choice. If people in Manchester say, or any area, say no, then that's democracy. That's your choice, and that's what you decide.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And finally, Gary Lawson of the Green Party.
Thank you. In answer to your questions, yes, I do accept the scientific consensus that there is climate change and that it is largely caused by human activity. And we don't want to make ourselves feel guilty. We have made some progress, both as individuals, as politicians, and even in business sometimes. But nowhere near enough. We need to redouble our efforts in the future, and we need to start doing that quickly. We need, by about 2050, to have a zero carbon economy. And that is going to mean that perhaps about 2/3 of the fossil fuels will need to remain where they are in the ground. If we take them out of the ground, they're going to be burnt and used. It would be pointless taking them out and not using them. So about 2/3 are going to need to stay in the ground if we're going to keep the carbon dioxide emissions low enough to be able to keep our temperature rise to that maximum of 2 degrees. That 2-degree rise is not necessarily going to be safe. It will mean some changes, especially for people in certain parts of the world. There will be changes, and in many places for the worse. Climate will be less stable, even if we keep to that 2-degree figure. So it's crucial that we do our best not to exceed that 2 degrees. And that does mean leaving fossil fuels in the ground. And that's why the Green Party is implacably opposed to fracking. The last thing we need at this point is another source of fossil fuels. What we need at this point is clean energy from solar power, wind, wave power and so on. We need to develop that fast. We need to use energy more efficiently. We need to insulate our homes, our schools, our offices, our shops and businesses, as well as we can to conserve energy. But the last thing we need is to be starting on fracking. Yes, it has risks from air pollution, water pollution and shortages, soil pollution, but it's the last thing we need at the moment. At the moment, what we need is to move fast towards a zero carbon economy and towards clean energy and efficient use of that energy.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Can I just end by asking the candidates to give a yes or no answer to the simple question, do you support the Guardian's campaign encouraging institutions to divest from investment in fossil fuels? Mark?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Mary?
I'm quite concerned about legislating in order to force businesses to take those sort of actions. So I would not be able to say yes.
John?
Yes.
Sean?
Same answer as Mary. I don't agree with people enforcing.
Gary?
Yes, I support the campaign. It's not forcing people, but I support the campaign.
Thank you very much, candidates.